Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to episode number 53 of the Primetime Rundown interview series powered by StreamYard right here on the Eastern Observer, I-95 Sports Network, and Zingo Television Channel 198. Ladies and gentlemen, in the few months that I've been hosting this interview series, we've had the pleasure of featuring our fellow athletic communications professionals. But tonight, we focus on a different angle as we look to talk to those who started out in our profession but have since moved on into athletic administration. Why are we doing that? Because we want to highlight those in the business that have gone on to greater things while also educating ourselves on what it takes for us to get that seat at the table. So we tonight here on the Eastern Observer are excited to learn about the path of our special guest who is here with us tonight, the Associate Commissioner at the East Coast Conference, Melissa Reilly. Melissa, thank you for taking some time with us tonight.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Well, first off, Melissa, we're very happy to have you. But before we get started, we just want to invite all of our viewers that are listening in or watching to join the conversation. If you have a question for Melissa at any point during the show, feel free to drop it in. Whether or not she feels comfortable, we hope she wouldn't mind taking a couple of questions from our fans or viewers this evening. So just drop it in the comment box and we'll try to get to it throughout the evening. And also, don't forget, please be sure to subscribe to the Primetime Rundown. That tonight's interview is available for download in the Apple or Google Play stores, or you can subscribe to the Primetime Rundown on Spotify and iHeartRadio and listen in that way, or search I-95 Sports Network on YouTube. It's just that simple. All right, Melissa, let's get started. We usually start just about every interview within this series talking about what's really gone on for us this last now what's going to be 12 months because we've never really experienced anything like we have in this past 12 months with this COVID shutdown. So for someone like you who has a full-time job, you're also a professor, you also are a wife, you're a mother of two. So how have the last 12 months been for you and your family?
I'm sure, like everyone else, interesting to say the least. There were some positives, though. I can't say after just about a year ago, this March, the second week in March, everything shut down. And from there, I moved to an at-home office. I still have an at-home office with I'm on my laptop right now, but I have a 2-screen setup in my office. I'm actually doing this in my kitchen tonight because the glare was not so great in my office. But, juggling being on Zoom calls and having your 5-year-old or 3-year-old run in asking questions. But on the flip side, my husband and I had more quality time together with our family because that's all we were doing. We weren't leaving the house except to go on bike rides and whatnot. And today was a gorgeous day. We started that up again. But it's been interesting. And anyone that you talk to in the field, whether they've been in the field for couple of years or 60 years, no one's ever experienced anything like this. No. So it's been interesting to say the least, but we're still working. We're still getting our jobs done. If anything, it's shown that I'm at a conference office. So it's a little bit different, but that my job can be done remotely and virtually anywhere. So not so much for those that are working on a campus necessarily, depending on the different positions that you hold. But yeah, it's been very interesting, enlightening, to say the least.
I think, and I kind of want to just jump off on this point based on what you had said, Melissa, was I feel like before the COVID pandemic that working from home or having that remote, unless you were maybe an entrepreneur, you were self-employed and you were able to work from home every single day, it just felt so much like working from home, whether you worked a 9-to-5 or whether you worked in college athletics, in such a way was kind of frowned upon because it felt like maybe you really couldn't be in a way as productive at home maybe as you could be in the office. It's incredible to see the way that's turned around in the last 12 months.
Because everyone, after dinner, yes, maybe on my phone I would check my mail or whatnot. But now after dinner, my husband and I are both going in and sitting on our computers for a little bit and working. Or, if you get up, you can't sleep in the middle of the night, you can run downstairs and do some work. And that's the reality. People are actually working more. Not going to say that during the day I'm not throwing in a load of laundry or something, but but in fact, I think people are more productive because they're able to get more done during the day, plus not wasting time on commuting in
Yeah.
those cases.
Yeah. Well,
Especially for those who have an hour or so commute.
well, I mean, look, Melissa, you've worked both on the school side and the conference side, and whether that, and for you yourself, what it's like to constantly be having to be picking up your phone 25 times a day, or having 10 different coaches stop in your office between the hours of 9 to 5, and you maybe have a volleyball match or a basketball game at 7 o'clock that you have to get ready for. So yeah, I think to a certain extent, we're more productive in a way at home because maybe we don't have those distractions, especially for maybe like you or I, who maybe has kids in daycare, and this way we can sit in front of our desks, or for me in front of my dining room table every single day and just sit down and get work done. For you, Melissa, I mean, for you over these last 12 months, are you now I know your offices are located in West Babylon, but are you still working virtually for the most part? Are you back in the office? Has it been a combination of both?
It's a little bit of a combination of both. Bob, the commissioner, he goes in probably 3 or 4 days a week. I try to go in at least 1 day a week just to, and it's funny, like I said, I have my whole desktop here, so I'm bringing my laptop to work where it was vice versa a year ago. But yeah, I try to go in, mail, touch base, but I have to say, no matter what, our communication is always there. So Bob and I talk a lot during the day, Casey as well. So, but we are, Casey is completely remote. And he is the one that's doing media relations in our office.
Right.
So, but he is completely remote. And like I said, I go in once, maybe twice a week, just to kind of touch base and make sure everything's running smoothly there. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a couple of guests on now, ranging from Division I, Division II, Division III, and especially on the Division III level, where sports really we're starting to see re-arise. But before that, I mean, for most of them, I mean, they were 12 months later, they're still working from home because maybe to a certain point there was no reason to even go in, because whether it's student athletes aren't practicing or whatever it might be. So I want to stay within 2020, 2021 here for a second before we backtrack a little bit, Melissa. But for you at the East Coast Conference, one of the only Division II conference, or I say you and the CAC here on the Northeast, that were able to produce a safe winter experience for its student athletes, a safe winter championship experience for its student athletes. And ultimately, you just wrapped up championships. Although it's been something you've been familiar with for a while, because between your two stints at the ECC, it's been the better part of 10 years. How was that experience for you, just kind of getting back into the fold with championships, knowing you're doing this in the thick of a pandemic?
We started with bowling, and all of the thought and preparation that had to go into bowling. We're talking about, and I'm not going to get too into it, but the NCAA has, well, they have testing requirements, and depending on the contact, and whether it's a high contact sport or whatnot, there's different testing regulations. So basketball is being tested several times a week, every week. Bowling, that was not the case. So in fact, we hired a testing company and did testing for our bowling championships day of. We required one for, and unfortunately 2 teams had to pull out the night before the championships because they had positive tests prior to. So something we've never had to deal with. We were now requiring testing, needed proof of testing. We had to test day of, and for that we were able to provide a safe environment, or as safe as we could, for these student athletes. We joked, and I said I never would have thought, because from previous years, everything that went into basketball championships at a predetermined site and selling tickets and whatnot, I never thought the bowling championship would be more rigorous to plan and the logistics of it. Whereas basketball, we reverted to higher seeds. The ECC had a policy that all of the officials throughout the regular season and championships were tested game day with an antigen test. So we followed NCAA protocol, and even because NCAA said officials could be tested if they tested 3 times that week, they were exempt. We said if you're are going to ref in a game, one of our games, we're testing you. So it's been interesting, and getting back into it was really crazy focus on bowling because that was first, and making sure we had our ducks in a row for that. Basketball wasn't as bad because we weren't having fans, and that's a big piece of it is selling the ticket and whatnot. But it was really like a regular season game for our hosts. It really fell on the schools. They had policies and procedures in place. The seating for the bench area was all staggered, special timeout sections, masks being worn on the sidelines when folks weren't playing. And of course we streamed it. Casey in our office really has built up, I'm going to say, an arsenal of video and production equipment for multi-camera shoots. I think we had a 4-camera shoot going. We were able to have broadcasters, but at least the parents and the fans and the student body were able to tune in virtually, like we're doing with everything else, and really tune into the championships.
Yeah, that's so important, and we're learning more and more now with not being able to, at least in the state of New York, at least right now, not being able to have fans at events and trying to keep everybody socially distant, that the best course of action is to make sure that we're putting out the highest quality broadcast that we can, so at least parents and fans and alumni and so on can be engaged. But for those that don't know the East Coast Conference, in terms of the number of schools, full-time and associate, that you sponsor bowling, you are the largest conference in the Northeast. So so for you, when you want to, comparing basketball to bowling is kind of like comparing apples and oranges in a way, because in terms of aside from maybe the schools that opted out at the start of the year, I mean, you're talking about testing how many schools at this point to make sure that they're all ready for a championship, hoping none of the tests come back positive.
Yeah, we were 2 of our associate members are actually in Tennessee. So they had pulled out because they'd have to be a week here quarantining in New York and whatnot. So, and some institutions were not sponsoring winter sports at that point either. So from our 14 that we had, we were down to 9 prior to championships that were planning on coming, and day of we were down to 7. But we successfully tested it. We still can't believe it that we tested over 60 coaches and student athletes with not one positive. But we really think that was because of the pre-testing, pre-tournament testing protocol that we had in place.
That's fantastic. So now we're going to do a little backtracking here, Melissa, and we'll come back eventually to 2021, but I want to start with you right at the beginning. So you're originally from Long Island. You're originally from Suffolk County in the town of Islip. So for all of us, we always say it on the show, or for those that I've interviewed, at least, I've always said that your love of sports, we don't just work in sports because it's an avenue. We don't work in sports because it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's not a 40-hour a week. We have off on weekends. We do it because we love it and because we've always loved being around it, aside from just doing what we do for our student athletes. So can you describe a little bit of what your childhood was like and what really grew your passion and love for sports?
Absolutely. Sports was and still is a huge part of my family. Growing up, to be honest, I was a dancer. I danced for almost 15 years. So I was into dance, but my brothers were 3, 4, 5 sport athletes, everything from soccer, the traditional soccer, basketball, lacrosse. They played roller hockey. They played baseball. They played everything. My dad played soccer. He was president of our soccer club in our town, East Islip Soccer Club. And my grandfather was an All-American football player, and my uncle coached football. So sports is in my blood. I did play volleyball all through middle school and high school. I didn't carry it through to college. But sports, I've always been, I officiated soccer. Like I said, my dad was president of the soccer club, and I made money on the weekends reffing.
Wow.
So yeah, those crazy like U7 soccer games, those little 6-year-olds.
Where the parents are getting way too involved, right?
But it's just been, we joke, football is huge in my family, although my brothers did not play. My grandfather played and my uncle played, and my dad played soccer. But on Sundays, you would think we're a Buffalo Wild Wings at my parents' house. We have a 3 TV setup. Like they bring TVs from
Wow.
downstairs, and one's on Direct TV, one's on this, and one's on that, and we have some different. My one brother's a huge Bills fan. The rest of my family is usually a Packer fan. My dad's all confused. He even has a shirt that says he's confused because he's a Jets fan. But and my husband's a Giant fan. But everybody, we joke because you can't be in my family unless you're a Packer fan. I've been to Lambeau. Wow. I've been to several games. But yeah, so sports has always been in my blood.
Wow. A couple of things that I may have never known about you. And Melissa, I think you and I know each other better part maybe of 15 years now. And so you're a Go Pack Go fan. I did not know that.
Yes, and my kids understand that even at their young ages. Some of their first words were "Go Pack Go." That's what it said in my house on the weekends, on Sundays.
So you didn't name your kids Aaron and Brett after all, right?
No, my mom was probably pushing for Brett, but no, we have a Ryan and a Logan.
And Melissa, I might be mistaken here. Are you also the only daughter of your family? Are you the only girl?
I have 2 brothers. Yes.
So for you, when you say sports is in your blood, I mean, for you, I mean, being around basically besides your mom, who's also a sports fan, I mean, all boys in your life, I mean, sports must have been just a religion.
It really was. I mean, again, I was a dancer and I did that, but the weekends were consumed at fields, whether it was the soccer field, the rink. As I said, my brothers played roller hockey for a while, basketball. I was working in sports. My youngest brother played at a D3 school up in Vermont, and I was working in college athletics and would somehow still make. I was working at the ECC at the time. I made almost all of his games for his 4 years. And me, my mom, my dad would hop in the car and go travel somewhere in New England for his games. So it's a passion for all of us.
So for you, let's kind of talk a little bit about your experience in terms of, what the field you pursued as an undergraduate at Ithaca College, which you ended up majoring. Go figure, sports was your life. You ended up majoring in sports management, and Ithaca College, for those that don't know, has a well-renowned sports management program where those that major in sports management at Ithaca also really tend to get very, very involved also in their athletic department because there's such a relationship between their athletic department and their sports management program on campus. So I think we kind of answered this, but was there any other kind of inspiration besides really growing up in a family full of sports fans that, kind of ultimately led you to take sports management up as your field of study?
Honestly, I went into school going back and forth with math, physics, education. I'm a math person. I'm a math mind, and I loved physics. And I do enjoy teaching, as you mentioned. I'm an adjunct professor, but it was either between that or sport management. And I went back and forth, but I took my intro to sport management class, and my professor was amazing, Dr. Wayne Bland, and we hit it off. And I was in the sport management department all the time. And so he said to me, is this what you're doing? Are you choosing this as your major? And I said, yes. And I forged such a fantastic relationship with all of my professors. I was on interviewing committees for hiring new professors and whatnot. And really, that's what solidified it, was being at Ithaca, taking that class and loving it, and taking all of my there was never a morning that I woke up, or an afternoon or an evening, whatever class it was, that I was like, oh, I don't want to go to class, because I loved all of my classes.
Sure.
And I loved my professors. So it made it so enjoyable. And that's how I knew I was really on the right path. I did get my math in there though, because I minored in economics. So
okay.
I had I had to get that extra business side into it.
So you learned a lot of supply and demand while you worked on in sports management. But I have to give you a lot of credit, Melissa. I don't think I've ever met one person now besides you who said that they absolutely loved physics.
Well, I know I'm weird. It's okay.
Excuse me. So going back to what we were saying in terms of how Ithaca, in terms of the relationship between the sports management department and their athletic department, is that where you received, even going back before your Dowling days, where you received your first exposure to maybe at the sports information office in terms of pursuing possibly sports information as what you were going to do after you graduated?
Yeah, it was kind of funny because the experience that I had, I worked in the athletic office, and Ithaca really is a hands-on program. So there's volunteer work that you have to do every single semester. You need 30 hours volunteer work. You have to do a field work and then a full-time internship. So my field work, they have a huge wrestling tournament. I did all the logistics for that. So I was really more game day, hands-on type of experience. And to be honest, I didn't really even know the extent of what the sports information or sports management or athletic communications, whatever umbrella the institution puts it under, what they really did until I was at Dowling.
Well, so for you, even before you got to Dowling, when you had saw, for example, when you said you ran the logistics of a wrestling tournament and at least got to see in some way or another the inner workings of how things work, what was your initial impression of it?
It was interesting and it seemed like a lot of work. And it is.
There's no sugarcoating it, Melissa. It's okay.
No, there's not. When I teach, because I teach in sport management programs now, if folks are looking for a 9-to-5 job, college athletics isn't it. And especially not sports information in college athletics, right? I mean, hey, I do compliance now. Maybe especially at the Division I level, maybe you can get more of a 9-to-5 in a compliance. But sports info, you are always on. What if something happens, especially at bigger Division I schools? But you are the public relations department for the athletic department. Sure. So if something happens, you need to be on and ready to handle that situation from a media standpoint. And I've had my fair share of those in my time, especially at Dowling.
Yeah. So we're going to now kind of transition to your time at Dowling. But first, you had graduated from Ithaca in 2005. You graduated a semester early, and I'm going to kind of let you tell the story here because you almost immediately got your first job, which was as the director of media relations at Dowling. So you interned as a senior full-time. You said you had to do a full-time internship, and you did that at Dowling College. So for you, growing up in Islip, that was just a short drive away to Oakdale. So how did this opportunity exactly transpire? Like I know you were already there, but what events actually fell in place for this to happen?
So I had started traditional fall semester. I started in August, and I was doing more of the marketing and whatnot. And my boss, Brian Graff, was the assistant athletic director for external relations, and he oversaw all the marketing promotions as well as a sponsorship and then the sports information department. So it was sometime in the middle of September that I got called into his office. Now I was learning what sports information was because I would help write the player bios. I would type up some of the player bios for the website and whatnot. But I didn't know the full extent until I was called into his office, and he said, "Melissa, the SID at the time was leaving and taking another job. She had just given her 2 weeks notice. We're going to need you to learn a lot of what she does. Like, we're going to teach you stat crew." And I went, okay, I've heard that word before, but I really don't know what that means. So I after about a week and a half, 2 weeks so I shadowed her for the 2 weeks. And then my first full week, I was doing the job pretty much.
Right.
They were helping me. Brian had learned, him and I together were learning volleyball statistics, which that gets very complicated. Soccer's not as bad.
Sure.
Lucky for me, I was familiar with both soccer and volleyball, having played, so it was easier for me to pick those up. But we had like 5 games in that week. You know how it is. And I went in, and here it is. I'm an intern, so I have a finite number of hours. And I went in and I said, Bri, if we keep at this pace, I'm going to be done, by the middle of October. My internship's going to be done.
You don't need me for basketball season, right?
Yeah, exactly. So he said, just hold tight. And I did. And I worked through another week or two, and I got called into the athletic director at the time, Rick Cole, who's now the AD at Hofstra. And he said, Melissa, we're going to hire you on a probationary basis, 3 months. And at 3 months, we'll have a meeting and see if we're moving forward. That meeting never happened. I was there for almost 3 years, took on more responsibilities as I grew, but it was a really interesting situation. I had a graduate assistant, and I was technically a senior in college.
Wow.
So she was older than me, and she was there, but she was great. She had graphic design, so she would do more of that graphic design piece, but we split stuff up. I had several graduate assistants through that time. And like I said, I really, the biggest thing that I did was I really never said no. So if I helped build a dock for the rowing team, myself and Deb DeJong, we were out there building the dock for them. I helped paint. They used to play at the St. John's in Oakdale.
Sure.
I helped paint the gym, anything that they needed. I ended up taking over SAC, and I was just always there and always willing. And that left a pretty decent impression, I guess, on all of the athletic administrators, because it opened up doors to everything else I've done in my career. So I'm very fortunate to have had that opportunity, and really was able to jump in even before I graduated college.
Who is, if you don't mind me asking, who's that first GA that first worked with you when you came to Dowling?
Denise Salzman. She was a basketball player. She was a former basketball player, and she was finishing up her degree, but she didn't want to go into athletics. But we had a great relationship, worked really well together. Yeah.
So she was playing for Joe at the time then, right?
No. She had played for, now I'm trying to remember. And we're going to show my age because this was 17 years ago and I can't remember. No, she had finished playing, but at the time, because Joe came to, I don't think Joe was always at Dowling. When I first started, I believe there was another basketball coach.
I don't remember who it was, because I know Joe was at Malloy for a short period of time when his first stint at Malloy, before he came back to Dowling, I think.
Yeah, it was. So it's really bad, but I'm drawing a blank, but I don't think it was Joe when I first got there. I know the changes in men's basketball, and I'm really trying to place it, and I can not. Joe did eventually, I thought he was there my second year. He might have been there the whole time.
That's all right. No, when you said women's basketball, the first thing that clicked into my head was Joe Pelican, just from his tenure there and the number of years that he was there. So for you, only being an intern at this point, and you get to meet with Rick and meet with Brian, both of whom are at Hofstra. So for you, I can only imagine, what was the intimidation factor like for you accepting, whether it was probationary or not, basically a director spot at that point?
Yeah, that it was. I was the director of athletic communications. Brian and I had and still have a great relationship. So even as an intern, that wasn't intimidating. Rick is a great guy, but sometimes can be intimidating, especially all of these things that this man has accomplished. Sure. And to be honest, I did attend I told you I was a volleyball player. I remember him. My first meeting with Rick was really when I was a freshman or sophomore in high school, and he was running the Long Island Power
Volleyball
Camp.
camps,
And
right?
I went to his power camp. So I still had him as Coach Cole in my head. So I think that was the more intimidating factor. But you know, and his motto was, to be on time is to be late. Like, so
Sure.
I was always I was probably one of the first in and one of the last to leave. It might just have been because that's sports info, but yeah. Yeah, but it was, you know what, it was a great opportunity. I knew it was a great opportunity, and I'm not one to say no to a great opportunity.
So for you, just looking back on your time again, showing our age, right? 17 years ago. But what advice today, looking back now, again, you really, we'll get to the teaching part and how really you're mentoring the future generations of sports administrators and athletic communications professionals. But what would you say to someone that's watching tonight, or whoever it may be, to say to someone that's looking to obtain a similar role early on in their careers?
It's really about making the connections, which I was fortunate enough to do, but taking initiative and being willing to do things. So like I said, I did a lot of things that sports information directors do not do. I was around and available, and I made myself as marketable as I could be. And that's what you need to do. That's what I tell my students all the time. I remind them that when they're sitting in the classroom, their best network right there are their professors. So if they're sitting with the hood over their head in the back like this, that's not making a good impression. And they could be the best person with the hardest work ethic, but that's not what you're portraying. So I always try to tell folks to portray who you actually are in the classroom. You know, you have to be there. I try to make my classes as dynamic and interactive as possible. But everybody you meet, be willing to make that first good impression and take the initiative. Don't sit back and wait for someone to ask you to do something. Be willing to say, hey, I see that needs to be done. Can I go do that? Because people take note of that.
Sure. Well said in terms of being proactive. So for you, what was it, let's backtrack again here just a little bit, but what was it about your undergraduate experience at Ithaca, even before the internship, or I guess with the internship included, that made you feel the most ready for that responsibility?
That's a great question. I don't know if there was any one thing. I think all the field work, and one of my volunteer, and I use this in my class now. One of my volunteer hours, well, several of my volunteer hours, where I went and helped out at a CYO scheduling. They had this massive, they were having this massive CYO tournament, and my friend and I went, and we sat in with a bunch of parents, and we were scheduling games and who needed to play. So, you asked about that intimidation factor. I've always been one who's been almost more comfortable in front of adults than I had my peers. So, I always wanted to hang out with the parents. The kids would be playing in one room, and I wanted to sit in with the adults. So, I think all of that and all my experience at Ithaca with that field work, the volunteering, okay, this is nothing that I haven't seen before, and I'm ready. And what else can I do? And how can I bring it to the next level? And part of it is my personality, but it really was the experience that some students thought forced you to do, but really all they were doing was preparing you to be out in the real world, because you can't learn real world situations from a textbook and sitting in the classroom. I'm a strong believer of that. Stuff happens, when the national anthem goes on slow-mo and you can't fix it, and it's the national anthem, so can you really stop it? True story. I was not the sports info person that it happened to, but I was the associate athletic director standing right next to the American flag going, oh, this needs to end. Oh, this needs to end. These things, they don't teach you that in how to handle these situations in a textbook.
Yeah, no, it's So for you, you made so many memories in your time at Dowling. See, I know you've done 10 years at the ECC, but for me, I always remember Melissa Perry as the SID at Dowling, because that's really, for me, when I was an undergrad at Post and getting to meet you for the first time. That's how I always remember you. So for you, what will you always remember about, your time at Dowling? Do you have a favorite experience that, I'm sure that you've got a lot, but do you have a favorite experience that you can pinpoint to?
There are a handful, but Dowling men's soccer. So Dowling men's soccer and the volleyball team both made it. Volleyball to Elite Eight, men's soccer to the semifinals, and it was a fall festival year. So we were all down together. Great time. Situation with the hotel, it was not okay, and Rick moved us into this other amazing hotel that were all suites, and it was cheaper than the other hotel. It was great. It was fantastic. But I will never forget men's soccer winning the national championship. And I'm still friends with, and I adore him to death, the head men's soccer coach, John DeRico, the whole staff. Yep. But he used to, we shared an office. Our offices were next to each other. And he used to call me Tinkerbell because that's how I would walk in my shoes. I know, funny, but I will never forget coming down from the press box, and the student athletes are going nuts. The volleyball team's in the stands going nuts. And coach just looking at me and saying, "We did it, Tink. We did it. I can't believe we did it." And I was really part of that. And he went, in fact, to call me. We had gotten home, everything, all the fanfare had died down. And I think it was a day or two after we had gotten home. I was standing in my parents' kitchen, I'll never forget. And John DeRico called me on the phone and said, "Hey, I just really wanted to thank you for all you did for our team this year, and how supportive you always are of the team and me." And, it's about the relationships that you make. There are still former student athletes that I stay in touch with and keep track of, because I'm so excited for what they're doing in their personal lives and their professional careers and how adorable their kids are. So it's really all about the relationships. But that's got to go down and we went to several national championship games with lacrosse and Elite Eights with volleyball, but that one really stands out.
So 10 years at the ECC, a few years at Dowling, so many years down the road, and then the unfortunate events of Dowling College closing its doors happened. So it hit you in a couple of different ways. Not only you worked at Dowling, you did your internship at Dowling, so you got your first, you got your real first taste of collegiate athletics there. You got your master's degree from Dowling, and then, of all things, you've done 10 years at the ECC, where Dowling was a founding member. So for you, how did it hit you when you heard this news?
Well, I was in the hospital because I had just given birth to my eldest child, and it was the day after, I think, that I had him, or the day of, because I had him the wee hours of the morning. But I remember being in the hospital saying, we had gotten news that we thought something was happening, because it actually was, they were closing, they weren't closing, and They were closing in a matter of like 48 to 72 hours. So a lot of emotions. I actually received my MBA from there. During my first stint with the East Coast Conference, I went to Dowling and got my MBA. My mom has her undergrad and graduate degree from there. And then on top of that, everyone in the athletic department were all very good friends of mine. So it hit me on several levels. Sure. Feeling for those student athletes, feeling for the coaches, feeling for the administrators. It's devastating. It's devastating when any institution says that they're closing their doors as an institution or discontinuing an athletic department. It's upsetting when an institution makes a decision to discontinue a sport.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but just thinking about all the history, I mean, full disclosure, I live around the corner from Dowling. So I see it every single day.
Yeah.
Um, and my kids love it. We go to the Racanelli building outside, and they go and they call it the echo space when we're on our bikes. But it's just it's sad. It's just sad, and to be honest, I'm fearful for what's to come, especially after the pandemic,
Yeah.
for a lot of smaller private institutions. So, hoping for the best for all of them, obviously. But, there could be a massive change in the landscape of colleges in the next couple of years.
Especially private schools too. But you were talking about how you ride your bikes and you're just a stone's throw away from campus. And I'm sure even doing something like that, where you're riding past and you just see the doors are closed, and I'm sure it's an experience that I'm sure you don't want to relive. But who knew that? Speaking of former members of the ECC, I mean, Concordia College just announced that they're shutting their doors as a result of the pandemic as well. So the pandemic just continues to spiral. The pandemic continues to give back, but it just in the worst ways possible. So we're going to get back to your time at the ECC, just because it's taken up so much of your career that we will discuss it and talk about your relationship with Bob and Casey. So you served in two separate capacities when you first started the ECC. You started out as their director of media relations before moving on to the business side and becoming the assistant commissioner. But that ultimately resulted really in your first non-SID in some way, full-time administrative role, where you were named the senior woman administrator and the associate director of athletics at New York Tech. And again, I'm talking about another school that has recently shut down its athletic program. We'll get back to it. But for some of us who are still full-time SIDs, we sometimes feel like, I guess, and I'm speaking maybe speaking for myself, but speaking for others, though, who say maybe sometimes that they feel that because you're an SID, that maybe you're barricaded a little bit, or hindered from obtaining that kind of position, because maybe sometimes an administrator doesn't know what you do or knows what the SID does, or sometimes maybe the SID position is, I don't want to say frowned upon, but at the same time, it's just maybe not looked at the same as maybe a director of compliance would, or someone who works already in athletic administration. So what propelled you as an SID to, even though you already had the title of assistant commissioner, to apply for this position and ultimately move away permanently from SID work?
Well, to be honest, I was at the ECC, serving in that capacity, as you said. I was the director of media relations. I also held the senior women administrator title at the ECC.
Okay.
Bob and myself are very big on professional development and personal development of the student athletes. So I also was in charge of really running all of the programming that we still do today, 10 years later. For our student athletes, and it moved into coaches and whatnot. But about 3 years into my first stint with the East Coast Conference, I had finished my MBA, and our assistant commissioner, Tom Emberley, was actually taking another job. So I went in, and here it is again about taking initiative. And I said to Bob, I said, I think I can do that job. I said, Tom had already been kind of, I wanted to learn about compliance. So he had already been kind of telling me things in our day-to-day across the hall kind of things. And he would show me what had to be done. And I, again, had received my MBA, and I'm a numbers person. And I said, I would really like to apply for that position, in hopes that we could rehire for my position. And we talked about it, and we went through it, and Tom weighed in as well. And Tom was a former SID and then moved into that position. So I was given the chance at the East Coast Conference. And during that time, my 5 years, I think it was, at the East Coast Conference, I had become very good friends with Clyde Dowdy, who was the AD at the time. And I was very close to Lenore Walsh, who then left to take the Old Westbury AD position. So when that opened up, I had the conversation with Bob, and I said, I think I'm really interested in this position, and then applied for that position.
Mhm.
And then 3 years later, I was back at the ECC.
Don't worry, don't worry. We're gonna bring the timeline present, but I'm staying here for now. While you had that administrative experience, as you had said, at the ECC, what was it like to finally get that first spot, even though you had it at the ECC, but really now, you were away from the nest where you had made yourself so comfortable for so long. So, what was it like that you finally got that seat at the table?
It was fantastic. I mean, I was upper administration. Clyde and myself were a unit. That's how him and Lenore worked. We made decisions together. Coaches and student athletes knew if they couldn't get to Clyde, they would come to me, and vice versa. So it was fantastic. He brought me in on the top level. I was in meetings with deans and upper level management of institutions all the time. So I gained more confidence, and I will not lie that the NYIT Sports Info department, my dear friend Sabrina, it was just her. So there were times that I had to put on, which again made me more marketable, that I did put on my SID hat. And had to cover or do something. And you know what? I could do it. Yeah, I might have needed a 5-second refresher and say, okay, wait, oh my God, I almost forgot to put in the clears for lacrosse. But
How does the ground ball work again?
What?
I said, how does the ground ball work again?
Oh, please. Oh, and no, I will, sorry, making you spit out your drink over here. But I will tell you that we had a situation at one point, and Sabrina there was my last year at NYIT was a little crazy, to say the least. I was pretty much the interim athletic director. I lost my compliance person because he took another job. And Sabrina was hired in alumni relations.
Yes.
She now is the director of alumni relations at NYIT, but she was hired as the assistant director. So she still helped out, but the GA was doing all the sports info. And we had a major situation, and the GA and I had to sit, and here again, sports info was not under my realm of something that I had to do in my job description, but because I had the knowledge, Chantel and myself, Chantel was the GA, we had to sit and watch an entire lacrosse game and figure out why the ground balls were so off. Right. Only to realize as I'm going through, I'm like, this was men's lacrosse. I said, oh my God, there's draw controls. They had scored, and this was our team was visiting, like they went somewhere else, but the visiting team had used the women's lacrosse, and that just screwed up all the ground balls. So we figured it out, we switched it over. But these are things that, no offense to any athletic director, associate athletic director, but if you don't have the background, I mean, unless you were a former lacrosse coach, but if you don't have the background in sports info, you wouldn't have been able to do that.
Sure.
So again, even though I stepped away from it, somehow I always find myself doing something back in it, even now.
That's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing, Melissa, because it's something you can always, not that you need to, but it's always something that you can fall back on. And I've worked with Sabrina plenty this winter, working St. John's basketball games, and it was great just talking to her about, what had happened at New York Tech and just kind of reminiscing about just some experiences. But this has become a bit of an ECC retreat because Tom commented telling you not to talk bad about that Tom guy. So, let's talk a little bit now, Melissa, about what happened at New York Tech, and as a result of the pandemic, that they became one of those first schools to drop their athletic programs, at least here in the Northeast, as a result of the pandemic. So for someone, again, this is looking back just on hard times, as someone who worked at New York Tech, even though you weren't there when everything got shut down, what was it like, even for you now back at the ECC, to hear this news?
It's devastating. Again, friendships that I mean, my poor friend Carrie, who I worked with at Dowling. We literally started our career together. After everything happened with Dowling, she was hired and brought her whole team over to New York Tech to start a women's lacrosse program, and here she was. It's happening to her again. You know, the women's soccer coach again was a former Dowling person. So all of these people who were my friends, you know, one of my closest friends, Dean Kambakis, is the athletic trainer, and you know, and Carlos, the soccer coach, all of these people, Coach Dunn, you know, it's just, you feel for the people and you feel for the student athletes. And that's what breaks your heart when any of this happens. You know, it's those poor student athletes who are like, what do I do now? And they feel lost. And in a time where everyone's dealing with, you know, making sure that they have a strong mental health regimen going on, right? Because we're all worried about our mental health. You know, this is just another blow, so to speak, you know, because we're dealing with a pandemic. We can't see, we got our spring seasons cut short. Now finally looking to go back to school and get back to it. And now I don't have a home. And that's how people felt. You know, the student athletes, yes, they could still you know, go to school and get their degree. But if you are an athlete, you know how much of a part of you it is, right? So they're now looking for a new place to play, and how is this going to affect me? And it opened up that wound all over again, and just watching it unfold and hearing from the student athletes and the coaches and the administrators is just, it's heartbreaking. And obviously, you know, it was another void to the East Coast Conference, and a strong athletic program. So it was upsetting.
And a school that, and you said a strong athletic program, just had a very rich basketball tradition, a rich volleyball tradition with Gail over there, and two lacrosse programs, one of which on their men's side that had won a national championship. So it's you know, it was hard again to see them shut their doors, and hopefully you know, this isn't the end, you know, or at least the ultimate end for New York Tech. So let's bring your timeline now to present, where you came back, returned to the ECC as associate commissioner. So you know, let's reflect on your time and your current at the East Coast Conference. So for you to be back where you're comfortable, what is it like to just be back working alongside Bob and Casey on a daily basis?
It's like home. You know, we always joke, Bob is my work dad. But you know, to let you know the relationship, I was working at Tech when I got engaged, and he was one of the first people. My family was there, my best friend was there, and I'm sitting in the car. We were actually headed into Arthur Avenue for a feast. It was September. And
not a bad choice.
Yeah, but so we're heading in, and I went, I have to call Bob. And I literally called him and I said, I just got engaged. And of course he said, congratulations. And I said to him, this is a wedding that you are not getting out of. You have to come. But we you know, I have great relationships with actually both of his daughters. His oldest daughter actually is working at Malloy, so we get to see her a lot. And his youngest daughter babysat my oldest son for at least a year. She was finishing up her master's in social work, and she babysat for my son Ryan, and so the family is always they're like family. Casey, I had known. Casey was a student athlete. We're the same age, but Casey was a student athlete when I was at Dowling. So we joke about that too. And from his time as a GA at Dowling, and so I am so fortunate that I get to work with my friends, and people that I am very close to, and that I love. So that's really, really special. So coming back, it was like, lose a beat. Was in touch with them all the time. I was only at NYIT, so I had seen them a lot anyway. But it was great to be back. It is great to be back. I think I lose track of time at this point. I think I'm back 6 years or 7, something like that. But it really is great to be back.
This might seem like the same question, but it might. I'm going to phrase it a little differently because maybe I'll get a different response. But because you've had the opportunity to work with really the same group of people for so long, what has it been like to work from a standpoint of on a professional basis? What has it meant to you to work with Bob and Casey for as long as you have? What has it done for you professionally?
I have the opportunities that have come out. Bob knows a lot of people, and I have been able to network with a lot of folks because of my connection to Bob. With Casey, he's taught me. He is the expert on producing broadcasts. But I have actually learned how to do that. I somewhat know how to set up the broadcast. I've had to step in if he had to deal with something and fix something on a camera. I know how to switch from camera to camera. I know how to put on a commercial. Again, I am by no means a great producer, but I can do that, and I can speak to that. So even he's helped me fine tune even that sports information side. But another thing is the way Bob leads, and as a boss, he pushes us to try new things and do new things. So I've had the opportunity to sit on NCAA committees, really with his blessing or his, hey, why don't you try this? I'm currently on the committee on infractions. I was the national chair for the men's and women's tennis. Not chair, I was on the national committee. I was the chair of the East region for men's and women's tennis for several years. I have sat in on meetings. I am very involved with on the level with the President's Council. I've become more comfortable speaking with college presidents because that can be an intimidation factor. But under that guidance, I've been able to enhance myself professionally. And again, he's the type of boss that leads by example. And it's great because we are on the same page with how we value certain things, especially like I had alluded to before, but personal development and professional development for our student athletes. So we've been able to do a lot of cool things with that. We're currently planning to a professional development opportunity for senior women administrators, actually all females in our athletic departments. And we're also working with something special for the SAC. So all of these things that we've been able to do, because of the way we work together, and really I've been able to enhance my skills, even being at the same place for so long. And COVID also helped with that because of dealing with a whole plethora of new issues. But yeah.
Yeah. You told Bob he couldn't miss your wedding though.
Yes, I did. He could not, and he did not.
What did he say to you though when you actually told him that? What did he say to you the second you told him he couldn't get out of your wedding?
He laughed and said, "I know." His wife wouldn't let him either. She's the best. So yeah, it really is. It's just fantastic.
Good. So you're someone that has worked in both settings, the school and the conference, and we've chronicled that over the last almost hour now. But considering you spent a decade's worth of your career in a conference office setting, what is it that you have such a deep admiration for that you've spent most of your career in a conference office rather than a school?
I think both have their perks. To be honest, if I was not teaching, I would miss being on campus a lot more. I miss the interaction with the student athletes, with the, with the coaches, but really the student athletes, and being able, there's nothing like watching that freshman class come in and see what they do over the 4 years.
Sure.
And see the people that they've become over the 4 years, what they do outside of the field. At Tech, we had the Fed Challenge. The one group that went to the finals of the Fed Challenge was made up of 4 student athletes. So again, excelling completely outside of athletics. I mean, they were all very good athletes too, but completely excelling outside of the classroom. I mean, of the field and in the classroom. But being at a conference office, like I said to you before, working virtually, it's really funny because pre-pandemic, I was talking to Susan Peel from the NCAA. She oversees the Eligibility Center in the NLI. And she had said that they were seeing at the Division I level, a lot of conference offices moving to remote because everybody travels for championships anyway. Everybody travels for meetings anyway. So it doesn't really matter that you are all in one place or all in an office. It also helps to bring talent from all over the country, really, because if you're not in either making that choice to relocate yourself and your whole family to take a job or just travel probably the same amount that you were going to travel anyway.
Right.
So being a mom, having 2 kids, the conference office affords me a little bit more flexibility with that. I'm not responsible for student athletes. I'm not responsible for coaches. I don't have that need to be on campus 24/7 like I used to. I joke all the time. I said, I don't think if I stayed at Tech, I don't think I would have had kids because I had 250 kids. They were my kids.
Right.
And working in college athletics, and depending on the person you are, you mentioned with student athletes and coaches popping into your office at times. I've heard and helped student athletes deal with some really difficult outside of academics and sports issues. So they were my kids. I care about them. I want the best for them. So I don't think I would have had kids if I stayed on campus. I wouldn't have been able to fit them in. But now, if the right opportunity were to arise, I would never say that I would never go back to a campus.
Aside from, I kind of lost my train of thought. I was actually going to make a joke and say, aside from telling Bob that he couldn't miss your wedding, what for you has been your favorite moment or experience from all these years that you've had in the time at the ECC? Has there been one in particular that you could pick out?
I'm trying to think. There's just been some really interesting situations where you can't help but laugh.
Sure.
Like when you are trying to come home from the NCAA convention and your flight gets canceled and you're trying to get home, and I forget where we were, but it was something absurd. Like I think we were in Indy, and we had to fly to Indy to New York, 2-hour flight. No, we had to fly to Charlotte and then come back. So funny, crazy things that happen like that, or, amazing. I have to say, a really amazing night was at our ECC men's basketball championships. Several years ago, we were at the University of Bridgeport, and Malloy was in the finals, and Charlie Marquardt's son was in the game, and he led all players with and they ended up losing the game, but he had something ridiculous, like 50 points in the game, like unbelievable. He could not miss a shot. And it was really amazing to watch because his father was coaching him.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing moment for him. And just being in there, and listen, I'm just at the conference office. I don't have any real affiliation with the team, but just getting that energy and feeling that. And even the other team, I think it was St. Thomas Aquinas, and they won the championship. But even the other team was just in awe of this kid and how he was playing. So like, that is a moment that stands out. Obviously, all the behind the scenes funny things that happen, you know, things going wrong and people not doing what they're supposed to. And, you know, and all you can do is laugh about it because ultimately it's up to the schools to do certain things. But it's just, we have a really, really great group. I always say how fortunate we are. The group of athletic directors and athletic administrators overall in the East Coast Conference are really fantastic. And I'm not just saying that, but I've heard stories from others from different divisions and different and conferences aren't as necessarily close knit as the East Coast Conference is. And we're really in it to help each other. And that's another great thing to see. So we really do pull together and have each other's backs. And I'm really fortunate to be part of something like that.
So we're going to bring this conversation now full circle back to 2020, because I don't think we can have this conversation without reflecting really on the past 12 months and what happened last March for all of us as athletic administrators, sports information professionals, athletic trainers, compliance, whatever it may be, coaches, student athletes, and just having their season just come to that screeching halt as it did. So can you, and you would be the first guest that I'm having on of the guests that we've had on this interview series from an SID perspective that works at the conference office. So can you take us through the events, maybe not on your campus, but in your office when the announcement came down that sports was stopping?
We kind of knew it was coming. So as I said, we're at the year mark here. And I remember driving down last year. We were in DC for our basketball championships. So I remember driving down, and John Hopkins had either made the announcement, they were hosting, that they were not going to have fans, and they might have ultimately canceled. And it was a stone's throw away from where we were in DC. So we kept working with the athletic director to say, are we shutting down? Are we not having fans? What's happening? So that was the start of it. Heck, I even remember I was flying out to the convention in January when no news was really starting to break about this virus that was in China, and that they were going to start to test. This is 2 days before I was leaving to go to California, that they were testing at LAX and JFK. And I was flying out of JFK into LAX and going, should I be going? And that was in January.
Right.
Fast forward to, we get back from the basketball championships happen. We have fans. Fast forward to the week after, which is this current week now, 1 year ago. And we're hearing all these things. We're talking with our colleagues at the Northeast 10 and the CACC. What are you hearing? Bob is on management council, so he's getting information. And we were going back and forth on, do we cancel bowling? Do we not cancel bowling? We were in the middle of planning it. And then we got the word. And you know, I was thinking about it, and I love the song, you know, The Day the Music Died. But it was literally the day sports died. And that's what it hits me, because nothing like this had ever happened before.
No.
That the NCAA is coming down and saying that they are canceling March Madness. They are canceling the Division I men's and women's basketball championships. That is like, it's still mind-blowing to think that got canceled. And then obviously everything else that followed suit. And, you know, the constant battle of, is this just going to be for now? What's happening with spring sports? Are we continuing with spring sports? Is this a pause? What is happening? And then it was nothing. We're canceling spring championships. What does this mean? And then from the compliance standpoint, the amount of, I was fortunate enough, I was in the right place at the right time. I was co-chair with Ellen O'Brien from the CACC. We were both co-chairs of the Conference Compliance Commissioners Group. So it's all of the compliance directors from each conference in our division. And so we had weekly calls with the NCAA, with the AMA staff, and the calls from the questions that you would never think are coming up. Well, can we do virtual streaming workouts? Does that count as CARA? And do we have to log these hours? And if we're doing some sort of social media campaign where we're juggling a soccer ball and kicking it over to the next person, does that count as CARA? And it was mind numbing, mind spinning, mind blowing, all at the same time. So it was 24/7, not knowing what's going on and what's happening. And to be honest, a year later, yes, things are better. Yes, we were able to have our winter championships. But now you hear talk, I mean, people are getting vaccinated, people are doing the right thing, wearing masks, making sure they're protecting themselves. But you hear that these new variants are out, and who knows is the vaccine going to protect people against that? So there's still so many unknowns that I don't know what's to come. And no one does. So we're all hoping for the best. We're all hoping that by, this time next year, we're laughing about it. I don't think
Hopefully.
we ever will, but, but at least that we come back to some normalcy and not what we're living in as the new norm.
So I want to talk a little bit on a personal note now, because not only are we focusing on Melissa Reilly, the Associate Commissioner and the professional at the ECC, but we're also talking about Melissa Reilly, a mom of two and a wife. So, and also who has a beloved family. So how were you able to, in the thick of this pandemic, with everything that's going on, you're having all these meetings, and how were you able to even just push forward, in your responsibilities as a parent and a wife?
Yeah, we really just tried to make time for ourselves and our family. We were the only ones we were really seeing, especially in the beginning. So
Sure.
Fortunate, we were in the spring, so we would be taking bike rides around the neighborhood. And we did, like I said before, we took our first bike ride today, this year. But we tried to have family time. We tried to do fun things with the kids. We explained it because at that time, my one son was just turning 2, his birthday's in April, and the other one was just turning 4. So they didn't know what was happening. So trying to explain that, but really we made a conscious effort to, I worked out a lot. I have this love for Pure Barre. My husband even bought me a ballet bar for Christmas, which was really exciting. I told you I was a dancer.
I know that, yeah.
It's kind of yoga, dance, Pilates all in one. So, I took a class this morning virtually. I'm not comfortable going into the studio, so it's great that I have the bar at home. But working out, as you said, my classes still continued. I was teaching classes, so they still continued. Because I just, don't think that I do enough. I also sell Color Street nails. So that business really picked up because you couldn't go to nail salons. So I had people. So I kept busy. Myself personally, I'm also fortunate enough that my parents have a second home in Vermont. So we would escape and quarantine there. They're on 6 or 7 acres. So we are able to go bring our food, stay in the house, but run around outside,
That's
and
great.
the boys were able to explore nature. We did go on nature hikes and things like that. But we were trying to make the best of it, I think, just like everybody else was, and trying to stay sane, with you have your anxiety, your fear, but working out definitely did help, still does help, and trying to stay as active as possible, because being confined to a house, you can go crazy. So outdoors was really an important part. I would sometimes take my laptop out on my front. I'm very lucky. I have a front porch, and I'd do meetings outside because it was fresh air, different scenery. Still doing my meetings, but and there are those, and I think everybody's understanding of it. But there are times that I'll be in doing a Zoom call, and the kids are running in, and you're saying, "Mommy's working, go away, mute yourself, turn off the camera if you can for a second," but these are the challenges that everyone's having. So everyone gets it and understands it.
I don't think I can count the number of times until we sent our daughter back to daycare. It was, "Daddy, play with me." Meanwhile, I'm on a meeting, just the same as you. But no Peloton rides, no favorite Peloton instructor while you had some free time for the last 12 months?
No, I do not. My mom has a Peloton bike, and I still have yet to go and try it. But I was, me and my Pure Barre community. That is really what helped to keep me sane.
So we've touched on it a couple of times, Melissa. So I want to focus on this part of your experience now, where you've been giving back and you've been teaching, majority at Farmingdale, but now you've ventured to other places as well where you're teaching. And for the most part, you've given back as a sports management professor just up the road from me at Farmingdale State College, something you've been doing for the better part of a decade. So at the same time now, even though you've been out of the sports information business, even though you really haven't been, based on the experiences you're telling me, you've never really actually left, but you're still helping to grow future athletic administrators, future sports information professionals. So what is this last decade for you as a professor, as a teacher, to really mold these young minds and turn them into the profession, to see yourself the way you started, and now that's what you're doing for them?
It's fantastic, and we talk about it. Sports information is centered around technology, and really the evolution of technology in sport. I hate to say it, but 17 years ago, I wasn't dealing as a sports information director with any social media.
Nope.
It was the website. And for those of you who might know this, I was on Dreamweaver. We weren't on, when I was at Dowling, so it would take me, when I was good at it and fast, at least a half an hour to put up one story. I had to crop pictures to like 4 different sizes and move things down and cut and paste and upload. It wasn't as easy as technology has allowed the evolution of the job to be, because there's so many other demands, to be quite honest. I was focused on the website, but now if you're not putting things out with video, with tweeting stuff out and Instagramming pictures up and whatnot. So social media has now evolved to a big part of what we discuss in class, and how to generate content, but also how to manage the content and really, because it's not just your account that people are following, it's the coach's account, and are the coaches doing and saying the right things? So I think the job has become definitely more complex, because where you were worried about what they would say to the Newsday reporter or Channel 12 or TV 55 that would come to cover you, now you're like, what are they going to put on what kind of pictures are they putting up? Are they tweeting out prospective student athletes? Like all of these things now that come into play. So we talk about that. And then the evolution of Stat Crew itself. I mentioned Stat Crew, but really now in my class, we talk about the NCAA Next Generation with the NCAA statistics. And how much easier it is that if you have a touch screen, you could just be going like this and you're not worrying about typing everything in. But don't worry, I play some of those YouTube videos of Stat Crew basketball and show them this is how it was and this is how it is. So
I love it.
I mean, and I think it's really important to have, I try to get a guest speaker or two in to the class. And I try to tell my students, I always push the internship or volunteering, because bringing it back, like you said, full circle, it's all about networking and gaining experience, because that's what makes you the most marketable. The people you know and the skills that you know. So, that is what I try to impress upon my students all the time. But it's been interesting over the last 10 years how my curriculum has changed, because that's the job has changed.
We always thought that in 2000, or even a little bit earlier than that, with the .com boom, and that it was more 24-hour news cycle than ever, because even before smartphones, we were just able to go on the internet and see the news that we needed to in the snap of a finger. It's 24/7, 365, even more so now, just because now you just need to open up an app or whatever it may be, and you get your news. I mean, look, I'm a Twitter addict now. I mean, up until about maybe 6-7 years ago, I didn't use Twitter. I had a Twitter account, but barely used it. Now, I mean, I'm on that thing more times than I can count, just not even so much for my own personal job, but for my own interests, my own self-interest, just following the teams that I follow along with, because I know that's the first place that I'm going to get my news from. So considering from where you started, and trust me, I remember those days, Melissa, even as a student assistant, just all you had to do was go to a game and use Stat Crew, and then go back and crop a photo and type up a story, and your day was done. There was no social media updating. There was no, I mean, there might have been a little video work, but not a whole lot. I mean, at that point, I think we were still using PowerPoints for our banquets, Yep. But as you look back over the last number of years, I would say over your decade and a half of experience, do you ever say to yourself that collegiate athletics, and granted, it has shown that way, but this is exactly where I was meant to be?
Oh yeah, every day. I was honestly saying that when I was in college. I interviewed with the New York Giants for community relations position.
Wow.
Yeah, and as for an intern, it was a community relations intern. But everything fell into place the way it is. I tell the story all the time. They called me, said they interviewed 5 other people. Good news was I was their top choice. They interviewed one other person and she got the job. And they said, ironically, that I did not have extensive enough writing experience. And that's what I ended up doing for a living for a good number of years, was writing. But I think it happened for a reason. And even in my interview with the New York Giants, they said, where did you see yourself? Like when you were in Ithaca, what was your dream job? And I said, well, one of 2 things, being the person that was really community relations. I wanted to, the NFL always had those commercials with the United Way. And
yes.
I said, I want to be that person. I want to be the
NFL 60, which is, yeah.
That's what I wanted to do. Or work in college athletics, because who doesn't love college athletics? Some people don't like professional sports, but everybody loves college athletics. It's college. It's college kids, So there's not once that I regret anything that happens. People say, oh, were you bummed that you didn't get the Giants job? And I say all the time, no, because it landed me at Dowling, which landed me at the East Coast Conference, which landed me everywhere that I've been. And I am fortunate to have the experiences of all the places I worked, but also I'm fortunate to be able to say that I can teach. And you said I teach at Farmingdale, and I'm teaching at 2 other institutions now, and I could not enjoy it more, because I do feel like I'm giving back. And I'm able to see the growth of these students, and a lot of them stay in touch with me still. I just got a question. Some reached out to me, had him 2 years ago, and is asking for a letter of recommendation.
Wow.
So, there are things that stick with me. And I'm a people person. If you can't tell from our interview, I am a people person. So, being in college athletics is great. There's nothing better, in my opinion.
I'm going to ask you to put on your SID hat for 1 second here, Melissa, because I want to ask you and you work with Casey every day. You worked at Tech. You were the SID at Dowling. So you've seen a lot. So in 2020, 2021, besides hopefully the pandemic will be, far away behind us, hopefully sooner than later. But is there something that you, from what you've seen, that you would change yourself about the SID business today?
That's a great question. Making sure you never leave an SID ever, anywhere. No, I know that's a joke amongst SIDs. I was left once, and I was not a happy camper. No, I just, I think honestly, making more people aware of what the profession is. And the reason behind it is something that you said in the beginning that stuck with me. That maybe in some cases and at some places, the SIDs might not, or athletic communications professionals, might not get the kudos that they really deserve. And it's really because people don't really get exactly what they do. I think sometimes it's that, and that, but they are a extremely vital part of the organization. So by allowing others to know what really the job entails, and again, why I teach, is to open up doors and also earn respect for all of what these individuals do. I personally have the utmost respect. I know the long hours. I know what the job entails. So I totally have tremendous amount of respect. And I used to say it all the time. The athletic communications professionals and the athletic trainers are the hardest working people in an athletic department. They have to deal and manage with every single coach, with every single student athlete, and the rest of the administration. They work the longest hours and they put the most into it. And that's not taking away anything from all the extremely hardworking professionals, but it's a very specific skill set for both of those two. And the demand is always there for them. There's never that off. It's no surprise that two of my best friends from my time at Dowling and at NYIT were the athletic trainers. So, I mean, still to this day, Trish Cronin is a very good friend of mine, and she was the athletic trainer at Dowling. And Dean and I try to talk on a weekly basis. So SIDs and athletic trainers deserve the utmost respect in athletic departments.
It's definitely a stance where I think SIDs, to your point, Melissa, from what I had said earlier, do feel devalued. But I think the way it seemed in certain departments is that maybe those don't know what the SID profession entails, but that the department can't live without it. So maybe we turn a blind eye to it and don't really understand, and maybe we don't want to understand what goes into it. But at the same time, we know that we have to have it there. So we're not done yet, but I just want to remind all those that are viewing, it's just been such a great conversation so far with Melissa for the last hour and a half. If you have any questions for Melissa, just to please drop them into the comment box. But before we get into a little bit more general conversation, Melissa, I want to talk to you a little bit about how now more than ever, we're being exposed to the lack of gender equality in sports, lack of gender equality in professional sports, the lack of gender equality in collegiate athletics, especially maybe more from an administrative role. How do you feel, based on, for someone that's been working in sports for nearly 2 decades, how do we, in your opinion, change that narrative?
I think it is all about empowerment. And if we're talking about sports, it starts with the athletes when they are little, but really through and really developing them in college. We tried to have opportunities, especially at the East Coast Conference, for younger professionals and for our female student athletes who are interested in getting in and breaking into the field of athletics. We see it now more than ever that even at the professional level, it's very minuscule, but we're seeing female coaches coaching males, and I think that has to be more accepted. I think making and empowering women to be to know their value and to be confident and to give them the tools and the skills that they need to be competitive in the marketplace. That's important in athletics and college athletics, but across the board, in every profession. I was laughing because I knew I was coming on here today, and yesterday was International Women's Day,
Yes.
and I thought that it was fitting because that's what we try to do every day, is empower women to shoot for the stars. And to be honest, that was instilled in me. You brought up my family, but everyone has always told me in my family that there was nothing that I couldn't do. If I put my mind to it, I could do it. And so I always had that in my head, but I also, my family valued a strong work ethic. So if you can prove that that you're there and you're willing and you have that initiative, the hope is, and again, it is the hope, but that there'll be amazing individuals that understand it and see it. The only reason I had the job or even applied for the job at the East Coast Conference the first time was because Rick Cole called me on the phone. I was working at the American Heart Association, and he called me and he said, Melissa, has the commute, because he knew I did not enjoy my commute from American Heart Association. And I said, oh, great. And he said, the director of media relations just opened at the conference office. I think you need to apply for it.
Wow.
So he empowered me to do that. And I've already spoke about my relationship with Bob, but he has empowered me to take every step that I have taken. In fact, he forced me because I said I didn't want to go. But through a connection at Ithaca, I received a job offer, an interview offer, and then ultimately a job offer through a connection. And he said, Melissa, you have to go on the interview. And again, that's why I call him my work dad. But this was with my first stint at the East Coast Conference. And he said, you have this opportunity, you have to go and take it. And then he said, what's the worst you do? You get offered the job and turn it down, which is what happened. But, I even was offered, I had two job offers that I turned down. One was working with a major league NLL team, and one was working in the website world with a website provider. So, you asked me about college athletics too. I had opportunities to leave. I did it once with American Heart Association, and it wasn't for me. College athletics was where it is, and again, if we're empowering people like I was empowered, if we continue to empower these young women, there's no stopping them.
So in 2 decades, and you already mentioned your personal relationships with Rick Cole and Bob Dranoff, among others, but you can choose to be as personal about it as you want. So in almost 20 years in the business, and I repeat that again, how have you felt as a woman in the sports business?
Thanks for hitting home the 20 years. No, I'm just kidding.
I know you long enough, Melissa. I'm allowed to do that.
There have been times. I've been fortunate that I've been in positions of power as a female and as a younger female. And in 90, I would say 90 to 95% of the time, I never have an issue, never had an issue. I treat people with respect, and as people, it doesn't matter who you are. That's how I live my life. There have been times that I have had run-ins with certain individuals that have put me down for being a female or being younger. And I politely had to remind a situation that's in my head right now. I politely had to remind that individual that I was their boss and but I was younger. And had I been now a little bit wiser, because once again, I keep getting older, I should have went to HR because that individual on several occasions had put me down and had treated, and I was the superior. And again, I don't ever like to put that. I treat everyone as equals. We're all equals. But when you're trying to intimidate me, I have to politely remind you that, so there's been, like I said, seriously only 2 people that come to mind, which I think is pretty good in a 20-year career, that I really had issues with. And it was both because I was female and because I was younger than the individual.
So what do you feel, looking back on those experiences, is the best way to advocate for women in sports going forward to avoid these instances from happening?
To be strong and to know what to do. Like after that conversation happened, like I said, I should have went right to HR and documented it. Because if somebody is making you feel uncomfortable, chances are that person's making other people feel uncomfortable too. So it needs to be documented. And if it's just a one-time situation in the heat of a moment, yes, things happen, but it still should be documented. So know your rights, as a female, as a person, as an individual, because nobody should be treated like that. Male, female, young, old, does not matter. No one should be made to feel uncomfortable. So in those instances, making sure you know who to go to when something like that occurs.
It's one time, Melissa, but it's also one time too many.
Exactly.
So as we start to wrap up tonight's conversation, Melissa, I got a couple more questions for you. So for you, who has been your biggest inspiration in your life that you say really helped me get to where I am today? Who have really helped you achieve your goals in your career?
Well, personally, and I know everybody says it, but my family, my parents have always been there for me, and my grandparents. My grandfather was the one who took me to see Ithaca College. He was a high school guidance counselor, best person by far. Anyone you ever speak to who knows the man knows that he is just an inspiration. And so he, along with my parents and my grandmother, obviously, have pushed me to do everything that I've done today, to take the chances. And then starting in this, and I'm not just saying this because he made a comment, but my first friend in the business was Tom Emberley. And he was in the business before I was. So he always tried to mentor and help me. So the first 2 people who really helped me when I became an SID were Tom and Jerry Milani, who was the director of media relations at the it was the NYCAC at the time, when I was at Dowling. So they helped me to kick off my career. And then I've met some wonderful people through, and I'm not just rattling off names, but there are some amazing females who helped me to get to where I am now and today, including, I know I mentioned Sabrina, who's a great friend, but Kate Whalen I always looked up to Kate. I worked very closely with Melody Cope and Deb DeJong, who are good friends of mine, but they helped me again to get where I am today. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say Lenore Walsh and Gail Wasmus. I was fortunate enough to work with Gail when I was at NYIT, and to this day, I mean, we still get together. We're very good friends, but these are people who all led by example, and who were willing to go out of their way to help me, and as mentors and colleagues and friends, able to move and help me propel my career in the path that I wanted to. And there are still things today, it's even funny because as you get older and you're meeting new people, my colleagues in the region offices at the conference offices in my region. Ellen O'Brien and Molly Belden, we text all the time, question with this, and even Carlin at the PSAC. I mean, what you do is you build a network of people that you could fall back on and bounce ideas off of. And at one point they could have been a mentor, somebody you looked up to, and then they become a colleague, and then they become a dear friend. So I am fortunate to have all of these amazing people, and especially these strong, wonderful women in my life, that I continue to bounce ideas off of and serve as a sounding board sometimes for them. And together with them have been able to bring up other young individuals into the mix. Some that Ian. I mean, Carla and Jess, all former student athletes, interns that now I see where they are. Brianna Felice, who's at Malloy as the SWA, was one of my first interns and a former student athlete of mine. So it's just so amazing to see these wonderful individuals and where they've come. So, I've had a lot of inspiration in my life from all aspects, obviously stemming from my family, but then I've been fortunate in the professional realm to work for great bosses, like I said, Rick Cole and Bob Dranoff and Clyde Dowdy, who have been mentors and are inspirational people in their own right. So, I am extremely fortunate.
As we wrap this up, Melissa, you had mentioned about your love for ballet, but have you taken on any additional? I mean, it can't be too much as a mom of two, of a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, but have you taken on any new other hobbies, projects over summer? Like, what was really your go-to thing during quarantine besides ballet?
Well, my bar, like I said, I have to say, probably like everyone else in the country, binge watching shows. Like when you just had to escape reality. Yeah. Like Outlander was a big one. Me and my husband watched Outlander. We watched all of Shameless. We just watched Bridgerton, Schitt's Creek. It ran the gamut of things and some great movies in between. But we just started The Crown because we finished Bridgerton. So we were like, well, let's try The Crown now. So it's carried over. Which is just funny because this is what everybody was doing. You couldn't leave your house, so you went out during the day. And what did you do at night? What did you do on a Friday or Saturday night? You watched Netflix, right?
That's it.
You streamed to something. Now, my husband and I were talking. I think I need to get another hobby. I just don't have time for it right now. We were joking about it the other day. I do my workout pure, but I love to read. With 2 little kids and an exhausting day, sometimes reading doesn't happen and I'd rather be watching some Netflix. So, nothing that fun and interesting.
I mean, you're out in Oakdale, Brookhaven. You could, maybe take up skydiving as a possible hobby.
I am not a plane person. I get on them to go to places, but there's no jumping out. I have the fear of falling out of the sky, so I don't really want to do that as a hobby.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much for coming on tonight here with us to the Primetime Rundown interview series. Melissa, as we had mentioned, is the Associate Commissioner at the East Coast Conference. Feel free to give them a follow on Twitter or Instagram at ECC Sports. But Melissa, thank you so much for coming on this evening and for sharing your experiences with us. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, Melissa, just hang out there for one more minute. But before we go, we do have to pay some bills and let everyone know what's coming up on the Eastern Observer. We've amped up your wrestling fix with our newest show, the Daily Wrestling News Show, with Minutes to Bell Time's Ryan Joy every Monday through Thursday in the morning, starting at 10 a.m. And then if you want to get more wrestling in, make sure to tune in tomorrow night. Al Carl, Tyler Adele, John Smith, Ryan Joy, John DeConti, and Gary Mihefe for the Essential Wrestling Podcast. with coverage beginning at 6 p.m. And don't forget, every Friday at 6 o'clock, Joey, Rob, myself, get you updated on what is happening on the pro and Division I college sports circuit on the Primetime Rundown. And we will have a lot to talk about in the coming weeks, including the NCAA Division I Championship, NFL free agency, and opening day. And all programming can be seen on the I-95 Sports Network and Zingo Television Channel 198. And be sure to please subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. All of this powered by the Eastern Observer. One last time, ladies and gentlemen, for my special guest, the Associate Commissioner at the East Coast Conference, Melissa Reilly. I'm Ian Schraier, and have a good night, everybody.